Hey,
Hello.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Wonderful. Let me just get set up.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't tell, you are projected on my front room wall.
Well, yeah.
Where are you?
I'm at the office here in Seattle. At the Stranger. Yeah. We have an office here. So I had a meeting, actually with Blaze. We were planning to do some science fiction together.
Oh wow.
And, yeah. This office was near where we were meeting, so I didn't go back home. I came to the office.
Nice. So how have you been?
I've been alright. It's been kind of a busy summer. I'm still dealing with a bunch of little stuff on the side, but for the most part, it's been okay.
That's great, and that's got a lot to do with your book, right?
Yeah.
So, Exocapitalism. So I suppose I can show you because they've all been delivered today, and if I was to turn the camera, you would see like a whole rack of boxes, and in the video of this you'll see that next to us is just a wall of boxes basically. So I should get some out and show you. Just off screen a second. And some scissors. Where am I? So yeah, we have them here.
Oh.
They're, I guess it's reversed. Yeah, we just got them today. They just came, so it's like.
You guys are fast.
So we have the book here today. It's all
funny.
done. We
It's
are.
amazing.
So I guess I was just going to pick your mind on a couple of things really, because
Mm-hmm.
when it came to approaching you about writing either a foreword or a review or something of this book, it was basically because I had some kind of memory of at some point you mentioning that one of your favorite Baudrillard books, or if not your favorite Baudrillard book, was Mirror of Production.
Mm-hmm.
And like usually I'm quite comfortable with Baudrillard's work, with his ideas. I was the editor for a huge book that was by Achim Sapansky, where Baudrillard was the main theorist. Like I found it okay, but Mirror of Production in particular is a book that I find very difficult. So I actually, when it came to asking the question of who do we know that we can sort of rely on to kind of understand this kind of a book, it immediately popped to mind that, okay, if your favorite book is Mirror Production, then you probably can handle Exocapitalism. So I wanted to start by asking effectively, like, when I sent you the manuscript, I didn't tell you anything about it. I almost deliberately didn't mention anything because I just wanted you to get a sort of first take for yourself and decide if it was something that you were interested in or if you wanted to be associated with this project. So what was your first impression of Exocapitalism when I sent you it?
Okay, first thing first. When I first read it, I read half of it, then I had to jump into another thing. And then I realized that I had to reread what I read again, so that I got a sense of the steps, the way that the thinking is going. There's a lot of new, for me at least, there was a lot of new concepts, right? And they were sort of building new concepts as they were going along. What I find, okay, let me get this right. What I find often is when you read something like Empire, right, by Hart Negri or something like that, right? It lacks a certain amount of boldness. And sometimes we have to say things that may not be positive. Right? We just have to, there's this idea when you're reading, and I was thinking about Hart Negri and how they were sort of looking at sort of Spinoza's joy, right? They transform labor into something that was like the multitude and all of this stuff, right? But at the end of the day, it was like a Hollywood movie with a happy ending.
I see what you mean, yeah.
You know what I mean? And a lot of Marxism suffers from this, right? They just will not confront the thing head on and let the sparks fly without trying to smother them, without trying to throw a blanket over the whole thing, right? Without us not going right into it and saying, my gosh, right? This is the world I live in. The world, when you're reading something like Negri and Empire, and then there's this subsequent work, and I'm just using them now because they're the easiest one to plow into, right? Because they offer the easiest platform, or the easiest model. The easiest model for readers to say like, well, look at what they attempted to do in describing our moment, or at least at the turn of the 20th century, right? In saying that, with the WTO riots that happened in Seattle, and then trying to frame it within this work, but it was to me completely unrealistic. Eventually, I mean, first I thought, yes, of course, because you learn as you go along. But as I got older, I just started realizing this is just not a really useful model. And also, I didn't really see the world I live in. One thing that exocapitalism does, which I think is really important, and I think that a lot of writers and critics have to get to this point, is that we are not outside. Right? The whole thing of the outside is a complete fantasy, right? I was literally born in capitalism. And I think we almost have to do this whole thing like they do in church. When you admit I'm a sinner. Right? You go and say it to yourself, right? I'm like this whole kind of thing, like, come on, stand up and tell us what did you do? And it's like, oh, I'm a sinner. Yeah, I believe any approach to capitalism has to have this moment and to say to the congregation, I didn't pay my bills, all this stuff, right? I exploited my neighbor. You know what I mean? And there has to be this confessional moment, right? But it's almost important because what else do I bloody know but capitalism?
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about an outside. Where is this outside? Are you kidding? Even in Zimbabwe when I was growing up, I mean, I remember that, I was looking at as a kid, I would look at things and say, oh, wow, look at how all these trees, all these fruit, all this, all these plants, and sometimes Africa is so fervid, so pregnant with life, and all these different animals, all these different kinds of plants. And then, I mean, it took me like a while to realize that they were all from other places, right? Tomatoes didn't come from Zimbabwe.
Right.
Bananas didn't come from Zimbabwe. Avocados didn't come from Zimbabwe, right? Going down the list. Oranges and all this stuff. And you realize you're looking at a capitalist, right?
Right.
Geography.
Yeah.
All along. You thought that you were somehow in Africa, outside of, right, the world market. And yet your own backyard exposes you as implicated. I just love the courage, right, to just come to terms that, yes, we are here, and this is a part of our experience. Not a part, it may be the whole part of our experience, but let's be honest about it. That, if we're going to find any solutions, we first have to admit this is the state of things.
Something that I was also referring to it as, it's kind of addressing the elephant in the room big time. Mm-hmm. Occasionally people have had a bit of a sort of adverse reaction to, in particular, I think there's like one line which you even mentioned just now, like where it says the problem is us, right? It's such a provocative, on the nose kind of statement that is, it's the elephant in the room, is that like we've been kind of circling around in theory around this idea that we kind of recognize that we're all kind of part of this. The theory is there for us to acknowledge that we are taking part in this system in many ways, but there's like a sort of almost an inability to kind of like go through the looking glass, or I don't know what kind of.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, to make the leap. Actually, you're right. To go literally to look into the mirror, in the mirror of production, the bodyguard, right, and to accept it. Seriously, two things. One is when you look at the mirror of production, and why I love it so much, and why it became an important text for me, was that for a long time there was this whole notion, even in the Frankfurt School as well, but the Frankfurt School did kind of break down, but the Frankfurt School did get into this a little bit, but it didn't really explain what the key problem was. So the Frankfurt School sort of understood that that when they're talking about Jewish bankers and all this stuff, and then they would point to the real economy, right, and saying that you have this class of people who are dealing with finance and all these things that are not real, right? And then you have all these other people like the workers and so forth and so on who make stuff, right? And who build stuff, right? And who actually are on the streets, you know what I mean, selling things, making things. And that's the real economy. And we have it here in the USA, right? We have the real we have what they call it Main Street, right? And Wall Street. As if the bankers are completely, right, in the thinnest parts of the atmosphere, and we're the ones who are grounded. There was a critique by the Frankfurt School of this structure, but they didn't really explain why there was this division. Right? Why was it possible to make people feel that when they went and bought a refrigerator or something like that, that they were participating in the real economy, and when they were buying stocks, they were participating in the finance, the mirage, right, the hallucination, the dream, whatever. And they never really explained it. And so what I love so much about Baudrillard is that he just said, my gosh, the stuff that we make is as fantastic as the stocks. I mean, where do you guys how do you draw the line between the fantastic elements of capitalism, say in finance or fictitious capital, and the products of production? You know, there's nothing more fantastic than these huge pickup trucks they have running around in the USA, right? You say that the whole thing is fictitious. There isn't a place where you can hide or you can justify in the system, right? And so this is what I love most about the mirror production. This was his criticism of Marx, was him trying to make a place you could go to within capitalism and find safety, right? In the worker, in the factory, sweating, right? Muscles being exerted, biological process, the real. I mean, as if what they're doing there, but that's phony. He's right. It's different. Parents don't have much, what we call it ectoplasms, right? The problems of their work are ectoplasms. They're just monsters. They're just crazy, right? And so once you see, right, once you break down that wall, well, you cross into the mirror of production, then you see that the whole thing is quite fantastic. There isn't a place that it's, right, that where we're not dreaming in some form or another. And social democracy falls apart to me. This is where I step completely away from the Marxists. Is that in a way I'm with Baudrillard, he's correct to have exerted his attention to the products, the way that they're made, the way that they signify. He's completely correct in that, because really leave the realm of the fictitious, right? There is no such thing as non-fictitious capital. So we have to dismiss that, get rid of that. It's worthless. And then the other thing is, once you accept this, the next thing exocapitalism does, once we accept this, then I think some progress can be made, right? Something that, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, it's not like this Matrix thing where you wake up like Neo, and having to eat gruel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We don't have to, again, they're sort of making it a real place where you eat steak in the simulation and you eat porridge in the real, right? And it's everywhere. It's not the Matrix. It's everywhere. You have to throw this overboard. But once you do that, and you say that we are actually, you know, that I'm mostly made of artificial nitrogen, but you know, I'm mostly made of, right? That I'm dependent on the pharmaceutical corporations, right? And all of these things. Once we accept it, once we see it, right, or as you know, our cyborgness, and all of these aspects, then I think we can finally make some progress. Here it is. This is my second point. A lot of people forget that just because we are capitalist subjects through and through, right? And so, as the book would say, lifting us isms as natural as anything could be, considering our conditions. And if you look at like Christian Locke's idea of the capitalist schema, right, that our minds are actually structured in this way, if we get a grip of that, you know, here's a guy, I'm always impressed by Carnot, Sadi Carnot. A lot of people don't, his little book on thermodynamics and heat is of great importance to me, because he looked at a machine, the steam machine, back in the 1820s. He looked at a machine that was meant to pump water out of mines because coal mining was becoming more and more difficult as they were consuming more and more coal. So they needed machines to go to places that were becoming more and more difficult to access coal. So he looked at the steam machine, which is pretty much a Scottish invention, and he looked at it close enough, and he finally discovers the laws of thermodynamics, right? And then suddenly you have Clausius coming in, having read Carnot, and he ends with the line. I mean, he's very technical, but he comes in and he says, maybe our universe is structured this way, right? And so he's looking at the cosmos from a steam engine, right? And go into Lord Kelvin, and they actually bring it out, like the universe works this way. And you could have problems with it, but I was like, isn't it kind of? So here we have this machine, and suddenly we are really looking at it in a whole new way at a world, at the structure of the universe, which I think is super impressive, right? We can't dismiss the second law of thermodynamics, the first, all that stuff, but it came from a bloody steam engine, of all things. And so what I'm trying to say is, like, when you do enter and you accept that this is the kind of subject you are, let's then stop and look at the things that are around us and see what can we see through them. And you know what I mean? Like, to me, the first step is just to accept that where there isn't, as far as I know, I don't know anybody who's ever lived outside of the capitalist market. I don't know anyone. I've never met anyone. I've never seen him, you know what I mean? I've never seen him walk. I've never seen him talk or nothing. I'm not going to act like, So that's what and so I accept it. I mean, I think that a book of this kind, it brings us to that point. Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about, like, labor, in the sense of what would you say to someone who is, I think there's a certain anxiety around the conversation about what does it mean for labor to be detaching from capital, let's say. I mean, what would you say to someone as a kind of introduction to this issue of capital lifting away from labor?
It's important. I think that's almost one of the most important contributions in the book, to be quite honest with you. There's been this idea, and I was drawn to it by a writer called Moshe Postone, who is not an elegant writer, but definitely, sorry. He didn't have much imagination as the authors of Exocapitalism do. They're a fun read, by the way. That's an important thing for me. A lot of people sort of ignore that, but I think that aesthetics is still important. One has to read with some joy, even if it's not what they want to hear.
Yeah. I think it's an important way of delivering the bad news, kind of like.
Right. Yeah, that's right. But Moshe Postone, who's confronted with two things in 1993. First of all, the rise of post-structuralism and the collapse of the Soviet Union. He tried to remake Marxism, and he's not a very popular person for taking this position, but I found him the most important thinker of that period, and if not even still today. And I know he was borrowing a lot of stuff from different sources, but the basic thing that he did was to break with Lukács, completely with Lukács, right? Where Lukács tries to make labor like the subject of history. Yeah. So basically, Lukács takes Hegel's, spirit, Geist, which moves through history towards its fulfillment. It's Amazon fulfillment. The word fulfillment center is now appropriated. You can't say a fulfillment without thinking of those huge robotic.
Well, that would be the conclusion that it deserves.
Yes, but that's actually what Postone correctly determined. So So Lukács said that the history, he says, let's get rid of the Geist and all that metaphysics and let's put labor, right? Let's put the worker as the subject of history. You know what I mean? And this was still a bit of Hegelian, because Hegel said something like this, right? Pretty much, that the workers are going to be the end of history or something like that, right? And Lukács does this, and that's basically the Frankfurt School, right? That's their law. In anything it's the only thing that's Marxist about them, to be honest, is their early commitment, right, to Lukács, right? And what Postone, who's Canadian, Moshe Postone, who's recently who died about 10 years ago, what he said was that's total garbage, right? That's not what it is. The subject of capitalism is capital. What are you talking about? Right? That's what he said, right? And Hegel was just confused because he thought he was talking about something metaphysical. But, as a of a capitalist economy, confused Geist with capital.
Wow.
Right? And he's so that's what first what he was saying. But this was absolutely a horrible thing to say, particularly for traditional Marxists, right? Who placed so much hope on the apotheosis of labor transcending, right, and taking over, and then finally we're supposed to be outside of capitalism in that situation. And he just said that was nonsense, and he was correct.
Wow.
And I agree with him. It was a big relief for me because I needed to get rid of that notion. The other persons who, and I sort of mentioned this, is the Kozo school out of Japan. Really interesting. The Kozo Marxists out of Japan were also just dismissed. For the Kozo school, they were looking at Ricardo and Malthus, and then there's even to a certain extent even Adam Smith, where they were sort of looking at this idea that an economy is composed of three characters, right? All of whom deserve a portion of the output, right, of the wealth, in some way, have a claim on the wealth. And so you have the renters, you have entrepreneurs, right, who need a profit, and then you have labor who need a wage. And the Kozo school thought this was another fantasy, right? that we should just disregard or flush down the toilet, because what they were thinking is that the wage is not really yours anyway. We shouldn't even include the wage. It's a joke. Let's just get rid of it and just be honest. The only players here are those claiming rent and those who are claiming profit. Right? We do that. We have a better understanding of the system and what it's doing. Right? But if you bring in workers, you're going to be disappointed. Because you know what I mean? But then you end up with this thing that somehow wages will fix everything, which you found out it doesn't fix everything. So you start saying we need greater distribution among labor, but you're not even looking at the system, right? You're not even looking at the way it's structured. Is why I'm not so much into the open Marxist school. I think that their rejection of structuralism is too strong. I'm still a structuralist, but I think that structure evolves. It's not settled. That's all. Yeah, but I think that you can take a picture of capital, which is what I think exocapitalism does. You can take a photograph of it at a specific time and see its structure, right? It doesn't mean that it stays there. If we get the sequence of DNA correct, we'll solve all these problems, yada, 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 right? Remember that there was a rush to get the human genome literally photographed, right? And everybody thought that, once we got that picture, all of our problems, all the diseases would be solved in the name. It was just a picture. We saw the structure, but it was the structure at a specific time, a specific set of animals, but it wasn't the whole thing. But the structure appeared to us, and it was useful to have the structure. And I think that when we're looking at exocapitalism, we are looking at the way it's structured right now. Which is, I'm so impressed why the book is out so fast, because it could change.
Well, actually, this was one of the things, because I think that they understood that it was very kind of imminent, it was very relevant to right now, and that things might change very quickly. And actually, I think at the peak of the kind of Trump tariff moment, there was even small discussions about something has already changed, and it might even be kind of putting time pressure on exocapitalism, because there was this idea that Trump had somehow reasserted the power of the state to control things. But in the end, I think that that's not really what happened. And they asserted something for a moment, but I don't think it's possible to really say that they've fully reasserted the power of the state in the situation. So I think the moment passed. But yes, it's like a very prescient book. It's very relevant to sort of right now. But also I think as I was reading it, I realized that maybe to associate the word accelerationism with this book was actually a misunderstanding. Because as I was reading it, I didn't find myself feeling as though it was an accelerationist book. And then I think towards the end of the editorial process, it became clear that the authors didn't also see it as an accelerationist text.
Nor did I. In fact, I state that quite clearly. I think that this is not an acceleration text. I was looking for accelerationism, but that the reason is that acceleration is still tainted with the idea that you're trying to get to the outside, right? You're trying to break from this, you know what I mean? You're trying to mean that there is an outside, as if, you know what I mean? All you're doing is trying to rush to it. And so that's not what they're doing, They're not trying to grind down, they're not trying to say that. No, you can accelerate processes in capitalism without the consequence of its demand, to a certain extent. To me, that wasn't the game in town in that book. That wasn't what they were trying to propose. And I think it's important that everybody has to let go of a climax. Right? We have to give up on that.
Like a finale.
Yes. And I'm thinking politically, this might be the most radical thing we can do. And that book avoids that, which is why it's so important. If anything else, it teaches us that we can be critical without having a finale, without having a climax, an exit, a final exit, right? No. And in that case, how do we think in a condition like this? That to me is much more interesting.
Have you seen Snowpiercer?
Oh, I love Snowpiercer.
Snowpiercer. It makes me think of that. They can't expect some sort of finale. They have no idea, and they just have to kind of manage the situation as it's going on. I don't know, this came to mind of relevant to what you're saying, if you remember it.
Yeah, no. That's a good question, because there's Snowpiercer the cartoon.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Here we go. Yeah. I mean the Netflix series.
The television series?
Yeah.
Okay. But there's also the movie by Bong, right? The Korean director. But he didn't face this problem because he could just end the film when the revolution, right, is achieved. The TV show could do another season, and the next season has to do with them dealing with managing people after the revolution.
I suppose I was thinking, in the sense of they have to keep the engine going all the time, otherwise their power will go down. So they can never actually. They have to essentially figure out how to slow it all down somehow.
Yeah, right. Oh, yes.
Slowly, and think about landing this kind of ship that's kind of, sort of gone way off of course.
The thing is, Hollywood has a problem, is that it can't make great movies from the perspective of the stormtroopers.
True.
This is where they've been stuck. They've tried, but they can't do it. Nobody will watch it.
Yeah.
Right? So they're stuck with this format, with this structure, right? Which is basically the structure, if you look, and here I think was the brilliance actually of Soderbergh's film Che, right? Because he goes and looks at the Cuban Revolution, right? But here's a guy who's doing Ocean 11s on the side, is his main income. Then he makes his film about Che and the revolution in Cuba, and they're identical, right? Because they're about a heist, right? This is ultimately what they in Hollywood knows, that everybody wants a heist, right? And a revolution is, in the capitalist form, correctly a heist, right? We got to get the best, right? The guy who's going to crack the safe, the one who's going to open the getaway car, right? And guerrilla tactics and all this stuff. So I think that there's an important truth to this, right? Why is it we're always stuck in the heist? You know what I mean? Why do they always sell us a heist of one form or another, right? And like Star Wars is a heist film, you know. Snowpiercer is a heist film. What you're trying to do is you're trying to crack the code of like the rich and the powerful. And once you open the safe, nobody knows what to do. What to do once you're inside, right? So nobody's ever really thought about what happens when this heist is successful.
It reminds me of something Zizek said. I think it's a very famous joke about V for Vendetta, about like what would actually happen on the day after the revolution. If the film was to continue for another 5 minutes, like the director would be kind of stuck, like.
Yes, because you never left outside. That's what I think is the important. You never really left the system, right? And this is why social democracy collapsed. This is why I have no patience with social democracy, socialism, and all these other things. I just feel that you end up exactly with where a lot of these television programs are stuck, right? It's not only it's an accident that they're so similar. If you look at Mr. Robot, right? Watch Mr. Robot, the TV series, and the best thing about it is, of course, he's going to crash the banking system or whatever with his computers and all this stuff. But once he does that, we have 2 seasons of Lord knows what. The second season is so bizarre. The second season is about him in a state of madness, and the whole season. No, seriously, that was the best that they could come up with.
Wow.
And the question you have to ask is, are we writing because... No. I want everybody to look at this. Is it that we're limited in our imagination? You know, are we just like, in that sense, stuck in capitalist realism? And that our imagination can't escape? Or, if we abandon that as saying that we're somehow ignorant or too deluded to finalize or to complete to make the transition into a post-capitalist society, this is where I want everybody to turn back and literally look back at the mirror again and say, what the fuck is going on here, right? You can look at it and then you can say, oh my gosh. And I think my answer to it, and I do have an answer, and I've always asked me, well, what is the answer, Charles? If you're saying that we're in this kind of system. But I keep saying that it's a cultural form. You have to keep this in mind. We are dreaming in a specific way. That's all we're doing. And so when we go into a transition or when we're looking for other modalities, we should admit that we're dreaming, and therefore, whatever other thing comes up, it has to be a form of dreaming. And nothing more, right? That you have to accept that. We're not saying we're getting rid of dreaming. We won't do the Matrix thing where you wake up and eat the porridge. We will admit that we were dreaming before, and whatever we do afterwards, it has to be a form of dreaming, right? That is the most political thing I can say, right? If you tell me that social democracy or socialism, the workers are suddenly in power and the real economy, Main Street is in power, as if value has not left. Like, you know what I mean? Like, value is a form of imagination. But so we have to accept that we don't ever leave the matrix. Maybe the question is, how do you change the matrix? How do you change dreaming? How do we dream in another way? But we should never say we're not dreaming. We're always dreaming. And I agree with this to the extent that there's a whole thing about dream time, which a lot of sort of Western anthropologists kind of deciphered or attempted to do around the Aboriginal people of Australia. But I've always wanted to say that, no, you have to start with that. We are in dream time. We are there's no other way to solve this problem but to find another level of dreaming, be it upward or downward, you know.
I hadn't thought about it in that sense. I suppose it's definitely a time of like, I can't stop, like I'm kind of like overthinking, and like my mind can't stop trying to produce images of what might happen, of what's to come, let's say, because, you know, I can't exactly get my head around the whole idea of labor detaching from capital, because effectively what is left for our reality when that happens. I mean, it's not a sense of getting to the outside, it's like the idea of this kind of system just lifting off away from us. Actually, it reminds me of something that you had said, I think in another talk, where you were talking about like, effectively we're waiting for a second punishment.
Yes.
We were sort of ejected from Eden, punished for eating the fruit of knowledge. And then we've sort of slowly been outsourcing our sort of toil to the machine.
Yes.
And at the point where it seems as though we're almost, or some people are almost out of it, the whole system just kind of departs. And it's as if there's a kind of second intervention almost, like it's the second punishment, like a sort of kick back to the beginning.
Yeah, we are, and I think that there is to me a great deal of anxiety about the second expulsion. There is everywhere. You have to figure out, particularly when you're looking at in America right now, what we're going through. It is the attempt to avoid a second expulsion. I mean, they're getting rid of immigrants and all that sort of stuff, but you get the sense that we went too far, and we know what I mean. Things got too good. God is angry at us, and we need to atone for this, right? We need to atone for this somehow. And before we're expelled, right, a second time, quite feverish, amongst MAGA and people like that, evangelicals, even when they're talking about the war in Gaza, you get the sense that that we're just driven by this, not towards apocalypse, but almost towards a
collapse, maybe.
Yeah, the collapse, and also a kind of thing that didn't eat the fruit, dear God. We didn't eat the fruit. we did our best. We don't have the knowledge. We just don't have it. You have the old knowledge. I think that's one of the reasons why the USA they're attacking science at this moment, and you have scientists fleeing, and you have them going after PBS. This whole notion that there will be no knowledge at all. And it's kind of bizarre to see this reaction. Nobody's taken that seriously enough that the second expulsion is real, and that we're in the midst of a reaction.
We're in the midst of like a rapture. We're watching technology ascend to where the robots have taken our salvation, like because they did the toil.
They did the toil, and yes, and so the robots are. That's why we see them as evil. It's completely. That's the source of our anxiety of robots. Actually, it's quite true.
They're the second-born child. That's like they're gonna get the throne, and like we're the firstborn watching this happen.
We're in an artificial Eden. Is what it is, right? That's we're in AI Eden. The thing is, and this is always difficult for people to see. One of my favorite comments by Baudrillard, just to sort of go back to him. And he's talking about Disneyland, I think in Simulations. What's that book? He mentions that Disneyland exists.
Reaffirm the reality principle.
Yes, right. So that it makes it look like it's the fantasy and we are in reality.
But actually America is the hyperreal, yeah.
Yeah, and this is an important point to say to people. And I've always loved it, right? Because in Eden, which is paradise, can only be this notion that it can,
simulation.
That we are. It is somewhere that has a boundary. What are you going to say?
Just that even the idea of recreating Eden is a direct kind of act of simulation. Like it's only possible. So like, maybe you're right that we have to have new dreams, because as long as we're trying to get back to Eden, then we're always just going to be chasing after a simulation.
But the thing is that he's correct. Baudrillard is correct, and that's why I love him so much. Is that he says no, we are in Disneyland. There is no boundary between us and Disneyland. Its only function is to make us feel that there's a boundary, right? And
absolutely.
This right, yeah. This is why sometimes the whole notion of labor can be as real as a theme park, right? Which I think is the real genius. I always tell people, like, the real genius of a film by Mudede called Hyenas, right? If anybody watches that, the real genius is his examination of neoliberalism as a form and neo-colonialism. But he's so correct. He's so correct. Not how he thinks about death. And it's so fascinating because he's not just thinking about death, he's also thinking about the visit. play by a Swiss-German director mid-century, Frederick. The more important is that he remade it as an African film. What happens is everybody is supposed to be living in some kind of reality where they're poor and no one has money and they just have no one's working. And then it's a woman who claims to have made money from prostitution shows up in town, and she says, I have more money than the World Bank, which is funny, and I will give it to the village, to all you poor people, if you kill the guy who broke my heart as a young woman. And the villagers say, hell no, we won't do that. That is not a part of our culture. You didn't commit a real crime. Breaking your heart is not a real crime. But then she says, okay, she goes and camps outside the village. And then everybody in the village, what they do is they start to borrow money. They start to borrow, right? They start to borrow money for fancy cigarettes and all this stuff. So they just get looped right into the, right? So he's so correct, they were never outside. He's right about that. They were never outside.
Yeah.
The poverty was not outside. Right? The cigarettes were always there. Right? The whiskey was always there. What happens at a final moment late in the film is that a theme park arrives in the village, and it's perfect. A whole theme park. And they all go on the roller coaster, right? And it's hard to tell people in our day and age that the theme park is really everywhere. Theme park can be capitalist, it can be communist or whatever. No, it can be all these other things, but it's a theme park.
Yeah.
Right? It can be religious, right? So when you're actually looking at this whole notion, when you're looking at what they're doing in somewhere like Dubai or something, right? That this is supposed to be Islam. It's a theme park, right? If you go to Israel, this is supposed to be Judaism. This is a theme park. Right? The whole thing is a theme park. Wherever you go, we're just going to act as if we're not building theme parks all over the world. Christians are doing it in the South. Everybody's building some kind of theme park, right? Even here in Seattle, where we have a very large gay community, and what we end up with is gay parade. Is we're looking at sort of theme parks again.
Baudrillard would, I think, in his last book, and I don't remember what was the case with his last book, whether it was finished or whether it was put together posthumously, but this it was specifically about carnival, I think, carnival and cannibalism, something like that. So I think that by the end of his career, he was really leaning into this idea of you're saying theme park, but he might say carnival.
Yes, was he meaning in the Bakhtinian sense? Bakhtin was a big deal about 30 years ago. Mikhail Bakhtin, he's a Russian theorist out of the 1920s, the golden period, or the period of the Russian formalists, right? What Bakhtin said is still important today. So what it is that there's a lot of films structured this way. What it is that the carnival would turn society upside down, right? The structure of society. So where the king becomes a fool and the fool becomes a king, right? And then you go into the carnival and you participate in this revelry, right? But then it comes to an end and all the order is restored, right? You know what I mean? So everything returns back to normal, right? There's a reset and it's over, right? And once you keep track of all the films that use this structure, favorite example, the one I can draw right now, is After Hours by Martin Scorsese, right? So you have this situation where you enter the night and everything is turned upside down. Nobody knows their social position. And then there's this uncertainty, there's this sense that at the moment the sun rises, everybody's back in office. Everybody's back in their seats.
Yeah.
Right? And so what you've had is a kind of release.
Yeah.
But you haven't had social change. So there's a critique from the Bakhtin about the carnival. And it's interesting to me because if you look at that, and if you look at it, you examine it closely enough, why can't we say the Cuban Revolution was a carnival?
Yeah.
Right? Which is now going into reset. Maybe the carnival lasted way too long, right? But it's now in a position of turning back to, particularly as it's entering the global economy, right? We're getting this reset, right? If you go to Vietnam, right now, which is a rising star of capitalist accumulation, right? You could actually say the revolution was also kind of carnival, where the fool became king, right? And right? But now we're finding out that no, actually we're going back to, everybody's going back to work. Everybody's going back to their, yeah, you guys had a long break. Well done.
First of all, I don't know exactly, I don't want to make the assumption that Baudrillard's idea of carnival is related to that, but I absolutely understand what you mean, because when we're talking about electronic music culture, there's often this idea of like the big night out theory, where effectively what may have once been a kind of, radical or political form of music culture, like rave culture and club culture, at some point it kind of becomes this Bakhtian reset, where you go for your big night out on your Saturday. That means that you're kind of at home on Sunday, and then suddenly you're back to work and you're kind of satisfied for the week. So electronic music is kind of, it's incorporated into capital in that way. But another sense, more my interpretation of Baudrillard's carnival idea, is like another thing that comes up sometimes in like rave culture theory, particularly if you read someone like Jeremy Gilbert, who wrote some book in 1999, Politics of Sound. He's sort of talking about how another way that capital, like let's say, territorialized or assimilated the practices of rave culture is like maybe at some point they were talking about the division between leisure and work, and that was an important capitalist principle, to have work time and leisure time. And rave culture kind of spun that model by having a kind of fusion of play and work at the same time, because you would volunteer for the festival and that would get you free access and free drinks, and so you'd be able to kind of work and play at the same time, and it was a kind of shake-up of capitalist principles. But at some point that becomes the de facto principle of capitalism as we know it, where now we are sort of stuck in a situation where we are always at work, because we are always on email, we're always working multiple jobs. So like, in a sense, everything became like rave culture. Everything became this blend of work and pleasure.
Yes, and that where the carnival is.
Everything's the rave now,
Order is, yes.
And
that's actually more interesting as an assessment.
And it comes with this maxed out serotonin or dopamine culture of like everything all the time, constantly, attention economy, this kind of social media culture and so on. It's all very ecstatic all the time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I don't know if I had any kind of closing comments, so I suppose it's as simple as asking if there was anything else in particular about the book that you would like to mention or anything like that.
One thing that I do love is, and I know it comes as a shock that I am a structuralist, but I want everybody to see that if you, as you pointed out, why this book had to be made so quickly is that the systems are evolving as fast as as we can, and this acceleration, which is interesting to me. And everybody says, "Well, why are you structuralists?" Well, I believe in this idea called configuration space, and I keep bringing it back up and up again. And I say that what's happening within the space is constantly changing, and sometimes in novel ways that we don't know where it's going to go. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in a few months, particularly with the decimation of several institutions in the USA, of several sort of standard government institutions, and an increased executive power. And now that we're facing something that I didn't see coming, but we're now facing the U.S. having two armies. Basically, after the budget was passed, I kind of mentioned this because I thought it was so important that we're looking at an army that's directly under the executive power and an army that's under Pentagon. And weirdly enough, right now the budget for the one under the executive power is larger than the one under the Pentagon. What is the result of this? And so, as I would say, everybody should read this book as fast as they can.
Thank you very much from everyone involved in Exocapitalism for your contribution. It was really a dream come true. I mean, Marek especially said that you were a kind of personal hero to him, so for you to read the book and engage with it and understand it, and yeah, it was a really affirming, positive experience. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope to connect with them in the near future, but we'll see.
Figure something out.
Okay.
Ciao.
Take care.
Yep. Bye.